Mr. President, yesterday I came to the Senate floor and spoke on President Biden's vaccine mandate. I explained that I've now come to this chamber a total of 16 times and offered 12 different bills that would counteract, limit, or in one way or another restrain the vaccine mandate. I also explained that, unfortunately, each of these bills has been rejected by Democrats in the Senate. I've spoken to Utahns and folks from across the country who have expressed to me their frustration at moving goalposts and changing expectations in the middle of a pandemic. President Biden's vaccine mandate, which has been halted now by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, happens to be among the latest attempts to force Americans to make health decisions under the threat not just of unemployment, but also under the threat of becoming unemployable. That's a taxing burden, Mr. President, for anyone to bear, anyone who's got kids at home, or if they don't have kids at home, if they're just supporting themselves. These days, all Americans are helping someone or something that they love, that they care about. And they ought to have the opportunity to do that. They ought not have their ability to make a living threatened by virtue of a distinct religious belief or a particular medical concern or a particular desire not to receive a particular treatment. And I'll reiterate here what I've said before. I've been vaccinated. My family's been vaccinated. I believe the vaccines are helping countless Americans be protected against the dangers of the COVID-19 virus. Just the same, there's a big difference between believing that the vaccine does good and receiving the vaccine on the one hand, and on the other hand saying that anyone who disagrees or who thinks that it's not right for them for one reason or another ought to be fired from their job and rendered unemployable as a result. That's very, very different. That's something that very few Americans would agree is right. In fact, according to a recent Axios poll, only 14% of Americans believe that someone who decides not to get the vaccine should be fired as a result of that decision. Now, in some lines of work, this sort of thing is already coming into play. For example, our military service members and frontline workers who sacrificed so much to care for and protect the American people during the pandemic are already being forced out of work. I've heard from many members of our armed services from Utah who are being discharged under less than honorable conditions and under conditions that are in no way, shape, or form appropriate in light of their many, many years of faithful, honorable service to this country. They're losing their jobs, and not just their jobs, but also their benefits, their dignity, their ability to serve further. And, you know, I've introduced and offered up a bill that would help them, but Democrats objected to that. On November 4th of this year, just a couple of weeks ago, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, imposed the requirement that all healthcare workers at facilities participating in Medicare and Medicaid be vaccinated by January 4th. This requirement, if it takes effect, will affect millions of Americans in tens of thousands of care centers across the nation. And unlike the mandate imposed by OSHA, which has now mercifully been stayed, at least for the pendency of the litigation pending in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, this mandate, this particular mandate, gives no option for testing if someone has religious, moral, or medical objections to the vaccine. Now, let's just think about this on an individual level. There are nurses in this country who worked faithfully and, in fact, tirelessly throughout the pandemic without regard to their own circumstances, in some cases without regard to their own health, their own sanity, putting their lives at risk at times. They've gone to work caring for others during a pandemic, and they've saved lives in the process. They accepted the risk, and they were rightfully heralded as heroes for doing that. They still are heroes, and they still should be heralded as heroes. But many of these same nurses caught COVID at work and have recovered. They are, in fact, heroes. But now the Biden administration is giving them an extraordinary, and I would add extraordinarily cruel ultimatum, one that I don't think I've ever seen in government, one that I didn't ever expect I would see in government. Those very same doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers, the same people who we just appropriately described as heroes, can either get a medical procedure they don't want or lose their current employment and any future realistic prospect of employment. Let that sink in for a moment. What if this were you? What if this were your spouse or your child, someone you loved? What if this were your friend or your neighbor? The truth is, these people fit into all those categories. They're not our enemies. They're our friends, our neighbors, our family members, our loved ones. At a minimum, they are people who serve valiantly throughout a pandemic, and they should not be punished. They should be thanked. These heroes will be thanked for their service with a pink slip and a boot out the door as they become outcasts in the very profession that they've selflessly chosen, in the very profession for which they've spent a lot of money and a lot of time receiving training, and the very profession to which they've dedicated their lives. What a tragedy. What a needless, senseless tragedy. These, Mr. President, are not abstract anecdotes. This isn't just hypothetical speculation. No, not at all. I've heard from hundreds of Utahns who risk losing their employment if these vaccine mandates take effect. They're everyday Americans, they're good Americans, they're valiant Americans. Oftentimes they're struggling to make ends meet and to feed their families. They're our neighbors, our friends, our caretakers, our heroes. They deserve the respect that is necessarily implicit in the ability to make decisions for themselves, including these decisions for themselves. Additionally, it's, as a practical matter, just extremely foolish to be pushing healthcare professionals out of their jobs at the precise moment when our healthcare system is under such incredible strain. Hospitals are understaffed as it is. I mean, a lot of places are understaffed. Hospitals are particularly understaffed, even without this mandate. So requiring medical facilities to fire perfectly good doctors and nurses and technicians is only going to further strain our system and place more Americans at risk of serious harm. So today I'm offering my 13th bill in the effort to curb the vaccine mandates. My Respecting Our Frontline Workers Act would simply prohibit any federal agency from requiring that staff in healthcare facilities be vaccinated against COVID-19 as a condition of that facility being able to participate in Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP. This bill would provide certainty to our nation's healthcare heroes and honor the sacrifices that they've made to help Americans in need at a time when we were, as a country, facing great need. It will keep our healthcare system strong during what is still a really difficult time. This bill is the reasonable, compassionate answer to the current situation. I encourage my colleagues to support it.